And so we reach the end, except for the part where this is a remake of the first game in a series that has 13 games and counting in its long-running continuity, so this is very much just the end of the beginning. But anyway, this is a discussion of the end of Trails in the Sky First Chapter, the remake of Trails in the Sky FC. And as such, it will have spoilers, not only for the original Trails in the Sky FC, but also for this remake as well. This video is explicitly designed to be watched only by people who have already played the original game and the original Trails in the Sky second chapter, so don't watch this if you're just getting into the series with this game or are a pre-existing Trails fan who has not played the Sky arc, or are just someone who wants to see any potential differences in story and other things for yourself. If you want my thoughts on the entire game in a completely non-spoiler context, wait a few days and a full review will be on my main channel. Thank you as always to GungHo Entertainment for providing me with a review code for this game, and without further ado, let's get started. Okay, we have reached the final chapter, but I am not going to talk about the actual endgame story events until we get to the actual end-ish part of the video, because there's still a lot more cozy, lower stakes, slice of lifey stuff at the beginning, and I mean, who doesn't love a good tournament arc, you know? Interestingly, this is the chapter that added the most new side quests alongside Chapter 1, with both having 3 new ones. In this case, while 2 of the Chapter 1 ones were substantial, and the third one was almost nothing, I think all 3 of the finale ones are substantial and interesting, and it's probably a good idea to add a bit more optional content to this final chapter in the first place, because originally all it had was the 2 sections of the Grensel sewers, at least one of which you have to go through during the finale anyway, and the wanted monsters are just at the end of each section. The least plot-relevant quest is an Anton and Ricky one, which not only was I very excited to see that they didn't have any inconsistencies with their names and their dialogue was still written well in this localization, but also that Falcom did something similar they did with the Annalise side quest in Chapter 1, and realized that these characters are kind of a big deal and fan favorites, so they gave more content to them in the remake. The quest is about finding Anton's lost wallet after he went drinking for the first time and completely blacked out, and yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about it, it's just more funny Anton antics that are about something they're not usually about because this predates his entire shtick becoming finding a girlfriend, which I think in and of itself is a really good bit. That one Carnelia volume that can only be gotten by watching him stare at the woman after she walks past him 3 times is still gotten in the same way, but it's signposted so much better in this version that I can't even really complain about it. Like, it has a blue exclamation mark, and if you talk to the NPCs with the blue exclamation mark, you will be explicitly told that you need to wait for her to pass 3 times, and then another blue exclamation mark shows up. So, kudos to you on that one, Falcom. In addition, and this is across the game, you're able to buy every Carnelia volume from a given chapter in a shop at the end of that chapter. So it makes it a lot easier to pick up on things you might have missed out on. On top of that, you no longer need to make a choice between Estelle and Joshua to give an ultimate weapon to. You're just automatically given both of them when you turn in all the Carnelia volumes to Baral. That's great because in the original game, I always want to give the ultimate weapon to Estelle because she's the protagonist. The protagonist is supposed to get the ultimate weapon, but giving it to Joshua is just the objectively correct answer if you want to perform better in combat. So that's not a dilemma at all here. And Estelle's been buffed, so she is actually good. That's the funny thing about the party member usefulness tier list. In the original game, Estelle is one of the weaker party members overall in combat, and that makes sense lore and character-wise, but the thing is, the characters who are definitely supposed to be your strongest party members lore-wise, Zin and Agate, the highest-ranked bracers you get access to in that game, are also on the weaker side of party members because physical is bad. And I'm pretty sure Olivier and Chloe aren't supposed to be stronger than an A-rank bracer, so rebalancing it so physical is good, and Agate and Zin are some of the best party members, plus Estelle being buffed, so both of the characters you're stuck with for the entire game are actually pretty good, feels so much better, so I'm really on board with that change. I don't really have a lot to say about the outside the city highway areas in this case, because those are always kind of nothing areas to me. All the exciting stuff in Grensel chapters was the in the city stuff, and yeah, directly translating the original area designs into 3D completely fails with the city of Grensel. Is it cool that you have the entire city in one loading screen? Yes. Is it cool that you can actively look out and see the entire city from the castle terrace? Also yes. But it really, really stretches my suspension of disbelief when the capital city of the Kingdom of Liberl has about 24 buildings and maybe 150 people in it, including all the brand new characters added in the remake who are uninteractable generic NPCs. And games and other arcs in the series tell us that that is supposed to be a city of 300,000? Just does not work whatsoever. I think the way large cities are handled in the Cold Steel and Daybreak games is significantly better than this approach. In those games, it is explicit that the areas of the city you can play through are only very, very small sections of it that are a couple city blocks in a relevant district or around a relevant specific landmark, and you can use fast travel to just go between the specific points of interest. The rest of the city is supposed to be so much bigger than that. I really think only Roland should have been presented in the remake the way it actually is, and all the other cities handled to some degree in that method, not being on the same loading zone as the surrounding highways, and you needing to go through a loading zone to get through the gate, and then go through loading zones or use fast travel to get to other areas of the city to give you the illusion that you're traveling through a bunch of streets and passing a bunch of things that aren't relevant to the characters. I've said it before, but the area designated as the South Block of Bose in the original game has maybe 4 or 5 houses and 2 shops, while everything else, including Bose Market and all the other relevant landmarks in the city, are in the North Block. In the original game, it was easy to assume that when you went to the North Block of Bose, you just went to the trading hub that surrounds Bose Market and contains other important places like the church, the Anteros restaurant, and Mayor Mabel's house. And then when you went to the South Block, you went to the Bracer-relevant area of the South Block, i.e. the part that has the weapon shop and the Orbital Factory, and later is the part that gets actively targeted by the Sky Pirates. But in the remake, you could just walk 10 feet south of Bose Market and be in the South Block. And from there, it's another 20 feet to get out of the city. And that's supposed to be the second biggest city in the country. Doesn't work there, does not really work with Gransel at all. The closest comparison to this I can really give is the city of Oracion in Calvard in Trails Through Daybreak, as its population is 280,000, and it used to be the capital of the country before it became a republic. It's also an ancient, primarily brick city with a skyline dominated by a massive castle and a cathedral, and the explorable area is 3 districts, each a little bit larger than an individual district of Gransel in the Sky games, and separated by loading zones, so it feels like you went through a lot of back streets to get from one district to another. Plus, instead of there just being a few buildings that all stand apart from each other, the streets are packed with buildings standing wall to wall, many of which are several stories tall, and many of which you cannot enter at all because why would you be able to enter every single building in a given city? On top of that, the backgrounds have a lot more buildings that aren't even bordering a street you can walk down. So the entire thing actually feels like you're stuck in the middle of an old storied city with a massive history and plenty of unseen stories you can only begin to imagine. Anyway, we were talking about new side quests about 6 minutes ago, and the second one, which I believe takes place after the second round of the tournament, is a Grant-focused side quest, and follows you helping him reunite a lost child with his parents. This doesn't expand on Grant as a character a whole lot, but it's still more nice, wholesome Bracer work, teaming you up with a character that you don't really interact with a lot throughout the original game's period. And one of the stops you make while trying to find the child is a conversation with the 3 Raven leaders, where it's revealed that, yep, they did actually try and ask what was wrong when they saw a crying child on his own, so you see a little bit of their hidden depths and desire to actually help people a bit earlier on than in the original games. There's no combat in this quest and no voice dialogue, but I still think it's nice. The third new quest is a Kurt-focused one that I'm pretty sure you can access right before the finals of the tournament. This one is mostly about more wanted monsters showing up and Elnan asking you to, if you have the time, help take them out and aid Kurt. He shows up to help you take out the last one, and he's an uncontrollable AI assistant party member like Annalise was in her quest. There are a few new voiced Kurt lines, and again, it's just more bonding with the B squad of Bracers, and getting a little bit more elaboration on these characters who I'm starting to think might actually be given an enhanced role in the second chapter remake. If you've been keeping track though, you'll notice Karna really got the short end of the stick, and I know as a fact I didn't miss a Karna quest because I got the achievement for doing every single side quest in the game. This is compounded by the fact that, for some reason, Estelle and Joshua act like she's the leader of the B squad of Bracers, when she really isn't, and Kurt is clearly the most powerful one, and then Annalise became the one who actually became a prominent character in later games in the series. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with there. They didn't change any of the dialogue talking about, oh, we're going to fight Karna's team next. I wonder what Karna and the other bracers are doing. But they didn't give her any new content, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it sure is what it is, and I'm happy the Grant and Kurt quests exist, because they're pretty cool. I'm pretty sure the BP requirements, which were already relatively lax in the original game, have been eased up even more. In my entire playthrough, I missed exactly one BP, and that was because I got spotted once while trying to catch the Crop Muncher back in the prologue, back in the demo even, so I did not bother going back to fix that. And I hit exactly max rank after meeting the Queen at the banquet, so I had the Gladiator belt you get from that for the entire endgame, including being able to pass it in between Estelle and Joshua's parties during the parts where they're separated, and, giving it to Agate for the entire final dungeon, because that's obviously what you would do once you get that. Speaking of the tournament itself, it is just as I was hoping it would be. I wouldn't have been surprised if the other matches were just done through cutscenes, but nope, they're still done in gameplay, and I still think that's pretty cool, even if you can't skip it because it isn't a cutscene, so I'm sorry, speedrunners. And they did even make a new HD version of the unique tournament battle transition. The matches themselves, I think, are pretty well designed as fights. The first round is absolutely nothing, as you'd expect it to be. The second round wasn't super hard, but I did have to slow down and think a lot during it. And there's a ton of active voice dialogue during it. A lot of it is just all of the characters respecting each other and pointing out how cool each other's fighting styles are. Everyone's like, whoa, Zin, you're so cool. Kurt praises Joshua's different bag of tricks. It's pointed out how cool Annalise is, but they don't give a lot of specifics about the 8 Leaves 1 Blade style yet, which is interesting. I thought they would have retconned at least a little bit more of it even into first chapter, but I'm sure we'll see some of that in the later games if they do some of that too. And the best part is, Olivier flirts with Karna early on in the fight, gets shot down, and then also starts flirting with Annalise later on in the exact same tournament match, which is absolutely hilarious. Honestly, I think one of my favorite additions is the active voice dialogue, as it's basically the only content in the game that is completely brand new and not an adaptation of the original game into a new visual style and gameplay format, so it is actually able to add stuff and brings a whole bunch more charm, expansion on characters, and a little bit more insight on other moments throughout the story that just didn't exist in the original game and is always a delight to hear. Even if, and honestly, especially because, a good chunk of it is Estelle suggesting something unhinged, Joshua being, no, Estelle, why would you do that? And then her being like, haha, yes, I was just kidding, who would actually do that? It happens at least once a chapter, and it's great every single time. All 4 of the bracers get craft animations that are just as good as the party member ones, and those animations are another major highlight with the remake. I cannot wait to see stuff like Kurt and Annalise's S-crafts in second chapter, because Annalise's especially was one of the more underwhelming animations in the original game, and they gave both her and Richard a whole lot more of the 8 Leaves flair that you'd expect from characters like Reen and Arios in later games. So not only are they more consistent with later depictions of their fighting style, but they're also extremely cool looking. So I cannot wait to see how much they cook with her later crafts. Luminous Ogre Slash and Afterglow Smasher look so unbelievably cool. Also, yeah, somehow Afterglow Smasher did not get a name change in this, which I'm amazed by, because that's a name that is entirely kanji in Japanese, so you would expect it to just get a completely different translation that didn't sound as cool, but I still don't know what was going on with the localization of this game. Like, there are a bunch of names that I expected they would have changed based on others that they did change that are still the same as the Xseed version, and Richard's S-Craft doesn't show up anywhere outside the Sky game, so it wouldn't be too big of an inconsistency if they did actually change it. I really don't get it. I'm thinking maybe Falcom gave them a list of terms and specifically how to translate them based on other pre-existing Trails localizations that was just wildly incomplete, because it contained things like Afterglow Smasher, but not Acerbic Tomato, Zin the Immovable, or Fisherman's Guild. Because, yeah, it is consistently called the Fishing Guild in dialogue throughout the entire remake, including a couple voice lines, but the sign outside it says Fisherman's Guild, and the map itself is called Fisherman's Guild. Like, if you walk up next to the door, it'll say, next, Fisherman's Guild, and if you go to the map screen while inside the building, it says Fisherman's Guild. So whoever translated the UI used the correct English name, and again, this is something that appears in other games in the series, so it actually matters, but it was consistently translated wrong when doing the actual dialogue. And yeah, unfortunately, the localization QA is about as bad in the finale as it was in Chapter 3. Same punctuation issues abounding. Even more instances of the subtitles not matching the dubbed dialogue. And at the halfway point of the final dungeon, an active voice conversation played that sort of sounded like it belonged at the beginning of the second phase of the final boss, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. And by the way, that happened both in my New Game playthrough when I had like Zin and Olivier in the party, and then also in my New Game Plus playthrough where I had Agate and Tita in the party, and they both responded to the Estelle and Joshua lines like they were talking about the second phase of the final boss. As far as inconsistent terminology, yeah, archaism as a term just straight up does not exist anywhere in this version of the game. They're kind of inconsistently referred to as orbal golems or something along those lines, which doesn't sound as cool as archaism and does kind of create confusion with other things that aren't quite the same as archaisms but are ancient orbal technology things later on in the series, so that's not great. Also, it's inconsistent as to whether or not people pronounce it golem or golem, which ordinarily I wouldn't care about. Those are two completely valid pronunciations of the word. Either and either exist, and that happens on a per-person basis, has nothing to do with geography or dialect of English, except Amalthea definitely pronounces it both ways, so if it's inconsistent within the same character, then it just does not make sense and is kind of a direction issue. I also noticed a couple weird capitalization things that are inconsistent. There was at least one instance, this might have been in Chapter 3 and I just forgot to mention it there, where a character referred to their parents as mom and dad, but they weren't capitalized when they should be. Like, if I say, my mom and dad are my parents, then that's not supposed to be capitalized. But if I say, mom and dad went to the store, they're not here right now, that should be capitalized, because I'm specifically referring to them with the proper names, mom and dad. And the line was an instance of the second case, but it wasn't capitalized when it should be. Jaeger is also very inconsistently capitalized, and it starts showing up a lot here. Precedent indicates that it shouldn't be capitalized based on the rest of the series, but there's about a 75-25 split in favor of it being capitalized here, so that is incorrect. Also, at least one point, it seems like someone just straight up did not have context for how Jaegers work in the world, because they referred to the Jaeger Corps as if it was one singular entity encompassing all of the Jaegers in Zemuria, which is just incorrect. And that's in a voice line. And core is pronounced corpse, which I don't know how that made it through. So all of this really supports this script was rushed to make a worldwide release and was barely edited theory, which once again is an issue that could have been completely avoided by using the Xseed script for the original game wherever possible, as that already exists and is universally better than this one. Alright, time to undigress again after an absurd amount of time. I think we were right after round 2 of the tournament. Another scene I'm really glad they handled well was the banter between the Capuas and Estelle and Joshua after the second round and before they get destroyed by Louve. The dialogue is some of the best in this script, the dub performances are good, but the animation also really sells it. Josette's new VA does a good job of picking up where her previous one left off, but I have to give a big shout out to Kieran Regan as Kyle Capua, who I think sounds the most like Kyle Capua anyone ever has in the history of anything. Kind of throwaway meme character, least important member of his family, Kyle Capua, is one of the best castings in this entire game, which is really impressive because, honestly, I think the dub casting is one of the strongest points in this entire localization. It is probably the biggest part of the GungHo localization that I have basically no real complaints on. Obviously, the vocal performances themselves are still really good, and I would say the direction is also largely good. Most lines are directed well, there's just also a lot of instances where the entire line is said as if it was in a completely different context from how it actually is, or an actor is deliberately told to pronounce something inconsistently with the rest of the series. Like, there are a few cases where Estelle says the name of the country and pronounces it Liberl, like it's been pronounced in every other dubbed game in the series, which means Stephanie Shea definitely remembered how it's supposed to be pronounced, but was deliberately told to pronounce it liberal, which, once again, is no more accurate to the Japanese pronunciation than liberal is, so they should have just stuck with liberal. My last major gripe is about the gospel. Before the heroes learn its true name and it's just called the Black Orbment, that is also inconsistently capitalized in text. Black Orbment is used as a proper name, so it should be capitalized all the time, but there are at least a couple occurrences where it isn't. Later on, once the name Gospel starts being used, it is written in quotation marks every single time it shows up. There are several instances in the original script where it is written in quotes, In the original first chapter script, it is written in quotes about half the time, but that is only in an analytical context, and only by Professor Russell, Colonel Richard, and Killica. When Estelle, Joshua, and Queen Alicia mention it, it is never written in quotes, and it is almost never written in quotes in the 184 times it shows up in the second chapter original script. So hopefully they follow that trend in the SC localization, because it makes much less sense to always write it in quotes in English compared to Japanese, where it is supposed to be singled out as much more unique because it is a completely foreign word. The instant I realized the incorrect laboral pronunciation was just how it was going to be said for the entire game, I became really curious what they were going to use for the pronunciation of Lieutenant Lawrence's real name. And it turns out they went with Leve, which, say it with me, is less accurate to the Japanese than what he's been called in the dub of every other Trails game. Luve is more or less his Japanese name pronounced as an English speaker would, and is also closer to what it's actually supposed to be. His name is the German word for lion, which is supposed to be pronounced Löwe. But as for the pronunciations that are present in dubs, Luve gets 1 out of 2 vowels correct, and Leve gets 0 out of 2 vowels correct. So that means the version advertised as being more accurate to Japanese is actually less accurate to 3 languages. It's less accurate to the Japanese than Luve is. It's not accurate to Luve, which is the previous English pronunciation used in multiple other games, and it's less accurate to the German word that his name is supposed to be. So yeah, every little decision like this is just another cut proving that we're straying further and further away from Adios' light. Also present in this cutscene, while Enforcer is given the correct English name, even though its Japanese name is actually Legion, Weissman the Faceless has Faceless not capitalized when it very clearly is supposed to be. Joshua pronounces his sister's name as Karen, when it's spelled like the English spelling of the Japanese name Karine. It's written Karine in katakana, and I'm pretty sure other dubs have said Karine. And his last name is pronounced Astre, which, yep, technically that's an accurate reading of the Japanese, but I feel like it wouldn't be spelled like the English word astray if it wasn't supposed to be pronounced like the English word astray in English. The one thing I will give them, though, is the fact that Weissman does not say Grandmaster in the English version of this scene, as the Japanese term he uses here in the original game and the remake is different from the term that has the furigana reading of the English word Grandmaster everywhere else in the series. So while Xseed chose to backport the later name into this specific scene because that is the only time they're ever referred to this way, that line was not changed in the Japanese version of the remake, so I think it is a completely reasonable translation decision to not backport Grandmaster here. I don't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure other dubbed games are inconsistent as to whether or not his name is pronounced Weissman or Weissman on a game-by-game basis. According to his Japanese name, Weissman is correct, but according to the German words his name is based out of, Weissman is correct, so either or doesn't really matter. I honestly think it would be kind of cool and a neat way to bring flavor to the dub if different characters say Weissman or Weissman in the SC remake. A similar thing happens with the Enforcer known as the Direwolf. Depending on the game, it's pronounced Walter or Walter, both of which are completely reasonable pronunciations of that name, and I think it would be cool if the inconsistency was on a character-by-character basis instead of a game-by-game basis, because certain characters pronouncing certain things with multiple legitimate pronunciations different ways is actually neat. That is the last of my localization gripes that I actually want to talk about, though, because, well, a lot of this stuff is pretty egregious, and there is a bit of jank, especially in NPC dialogue. Most of the story dialogue is pretty good, and they absolutely locked in with the entire endgame, so that was nice to see. Once again, we're back to the tournament after another major digression. It takes almost as much time for me to get back to talking about the tournament as it does to do all the NPC dialogue and side content in between each round of the tournament, so that's probably bad for me, but good for viewer retention if you're still here, which I kind of doubt you are. Anyway, though, it was a pretty good boss fight. Honestly, the Special Ops Claw guys are a lot less annoying in the remake compared to the original because they don't just spam their delay move, they have a seal move and a poison move too, and it is so much better getting hit by different status effects instead of just delay every single time. Like, it's neat to actually stack different resistances for things or balance healing status conditions with just powering through them. It's just so much better than, oops, I guess they got the good RNG this time and I'm not going to get to play the game until someone gets hit enough to use their S-Break. Winning the tournament, we get to the castle segment, and I like a lot of this. I think it was pretty well executed in this version of the game. The banquet cutscene itself is pretty good. The cinematography is nice and tense when it needs to be. I think a lot of the writing is good, and Zin's English performance is nonchalant but also clued in enough where it really does seem like he knows more than he lets on way sooner than he actually reveals that to Estelle and Joshua. Alright, maid time. And there's a lot I really like about the maid section, surprisingly enough. The first thing is, they actually let you still play as Hilda with Estelle and Joshua following her. I was not expecting them to actually do that. That's pretty neat. They even gave Hilda a specific running animation, which the original game did not have. On top of that, though, your run speed is actually less than it normally is. Like, I'm pretty sure you get limited to the in-battle run speed as opposed to the normal run speed during this section, so that's really funny. There's active voice dialogue where Estelle talks about having always wanted to wear a maid dress. There's also Estelle forcing Joshua to say a maid line she made him practice, which is great. A lot of Maid Joshua's dialogue is voiced, and I think it works a lot better in the Japanese version where he is actually voiced by a woman in both this and the original game. But there's also a lot of inherent hilarity from making Johnny Young Bosch say those lines in the first place, so either or, you can't really miss with that. I'm pretty sure she does it in the original game too, but if you go back and talk to Maybelle and Lila while you're in the maid outfits, Lila will very clearly recognize you and Maybelle doesn't, and I'm a big fan of the glare they make her give you. I'm pretty sure the only time she uses that exact facial expression in this entire game is when she's making Niall and Dorothy leave the mayor's manor back in chapter 1, so big fan of that. And then the thing that completely killed me, and it's like the most understated joke that's never directly acknowledged at all in the game, is Maid Joshua has boobs. Like, I'm pretty sure he uses the same base body model that Maid Estelle does, and it's just the heads that are swapped, which is absolutely hilarious. That I guess Shay and Hilda were like, no one will buy that this person is a maid unless we also put boobs in, even though flat-chested women exist. And a flat-chested version of the maid model does already exist in the game, because the maids in the play are played by guys. So they legitimately have bespoke flat-chested versions of the maid model, but they didn't use it here. There is an explicit justification for where the wig came from. It's a backup hairpiece for Chloe, but I guess they just had fake boobs laying around in the maid quarters, and Estelle was like, no, you gotta use those too. And Shay and Hilda were like, yeah, you're right, we gotta use those too. Another thing that was pretty cool is that pretty much every scene revolving around the fake name Estelle gives that you get to choose is a voiced scene, and I'm pretty sure there are different versions for each option. I didn't go back and check because it's impossible for me to choose anything other than Lena whenever I'm prompted with that choice, because that is 100% what Estelle would say in that situation. But there are at least 2 or 3 different occasions where the name is said out loud, so it seems like they did actually record different versions of each line, which I think is pretty cool. I also really like Doonan in the dub. His performance is completely different from everyone else's in the game, but it works because Doonan himself is acting like a man completely out of time. The point is he's so out of touch and still acting like medieval royalty in a setting that takes place half a century after the Industrial Revolution, and society has kind of progressed even past where that would be in the real world. So while it's out of place and jarring, the faux medieval Britishy accent is jarring in a way that makes sense for the character it's applied to. Doonan and Zin both act drunk during the sequence, and Zin made me remember things from the tournament again. So I have a couple other things I want to talk about the Bracer B squad that I didn't mention earlier. The first is that Kurt's Feng Shui craft animations all have him use different talismans, which is really cool. I'm wondering if we're going to get another expanded Kurt quest in second chapter that actually discusses how Feng Shui works and maybe compares and contrasts it with the 8 Leaves. But even just knowing that he uses talismans to use a lot of these powers is a very cool expansion on his original abilities. I'm also kind of wondering when we're going to see another Feng Shui practitioner in the series, because, Calvard is kind of close to the east. It's the closest we've ever been to the east. And as of Horizon, Kurt is the only Feng Shui person we've ever seen, and he hasn't appeared since Sky 3rd, so, East arc where we actually meet more people who work that way when? While all of Kurt's lines when he uses his Fangshu crafts are pretty cool, I do have to say, in terms of battle dialogue from the original Sky trilogy that I really miss in this version, number 1 is Estelle saying "we're good to go" as a victory quote. Number 2 is Estelle saying "come on" when she uses morale. Number 3 is Tita saying "ooh, scary" as a victory quote. But number 4 is definitely Kurt saying "by my arts, become hard as steel," which on its own is really funny, but it becomes absolutely hilarious when you remember that there are 4 games in this series called Trails of Cold Steel. Like, you could have Kurt say, "by my arts, become cold as steel." You could have Reen say a version of that quote. You could have the Legend of Heroes Trails of Hard Steel. There is so much untapped meme potential in that one line that's been basically completely erased by the fact that the remake is now going to be the default version of this game in the eyes of the casual Trails fan. So, truly a tragedy. Remake has no soul and never should have been made 0.2 out of 10. The second thing is Grant. He's like the most just some guy important character in the entire game, and his entire fighting style is just, he has a sword, and he's going to do animations that wouldn't be out of place from a mercenary in GBA Fire Emblem. All of his crafts now have Grant Sword, name of the craft, which is hilarious. But most importantly, the Grant Special is still called the Grant Special. That is one of my favorite enemy crafts in the entire series. And I really hope SC gives us at least a fight where he's an AI party member, if not one where he's completely playable, because I want the Grant Special on my side, Adios, damn it. Back to the castle, let's meet the Queen. I think this scene was done extraordinarily well. I'm a big fan of Queen Alicia's tweaked design. I really like how they made her hair more noticeably purple. It's a lot closer to her sprites from the original game than her portraits from the original, because she's Chloe's grandma. Of course she'd have a similar natural purplish hair color. And then also, when she gives the speech explaining Cassius's backstory, there are more CGs in this version than there were in the original games. And that allows them to show more stuff, a lot of which has to do with stuff later in the series. There's a few shots of an overhead map of the war, which is always awesome, but the coolest thing is, I think this is the first time the entirety of Liberl has been drawn in the map style that's been used consistently in-game since Cold Steel 1. Previously, whenever they wanted to show the entirety of Western Zemuria, they'd usually just kind of have Erebonia using the Cold Steel map, have Calvard using whatever part of the Calvard map was complete at that point in time, and then just kind of blend the original Skygame Liberl map into the southwestern bit, and that does not work. The border is completely inconsistent between that map and the Cold Steel map, and the southern coastline is massively changed between the Liberl arc and Trails Through Daybreak, so it never really looked good, but now they actually have the entirety of Liberl drawn in that way, so that really increases my hopes that eventually we're going to get a map of the entirety of Zemuria in that style, which I cannot wait for. At least show me how far east the Transcontinental Railroad goes. Then they even show a CG of the truce being made between Liberl and Erebonia at the end of the war. General Morgan shaking hands with General Van Dyke of Erebonia, who is an important supporting character in the Cold Steel games. Behind Morgan, we see Gileath Osborne, which is cool for a couple reasons. The first is his existence is alluded to as early as first chapter, but they 100% did not have a finalized design for him until he physically shows up in person for the first time in Sky 3rd. So backporting him here makes sense. We know as a fact he was here at the time. And I'm pretty sure this is even the second instance in the entire series where he's shown in an Erebonian military uniform, but not in a bespoke younger design. So that's pretty cool. Olaf Craig is also in the background behind Osborne, which is neat. We know he was one of the most important generals for Erebonia during the war in its entirety. Honestly, he should be in front of Osborne in terms of importance to the war itself, but Osborne's obviously the more important character to the entire series, so it makes sense that he's closer to the front. Then on the Liberl side, standing behind Morgan, we have Cassius and Richard, as you would expect. This is a rare instance of Richard being in his non-special ops uniform. No Sid, though I think he might actually be young enough that he wasn't even in the army at all during this time. Standing behind Cassius and Richard, I guess as a representative of the church to oversee everything, is Gunther Barkhorn of all characters. Definitely not someone I would ever expect to see in 100 Days War CG. Like, I kind of assumed there was a church representative here, and it would have to be someone not from one of the two warring nations, but like, you'd think they'd put someone like Einselnate or even Rufina here, but no, good old roaring lion Mr. Barkhorn. Also, in the background on the liberal side is a Daybreak character who I'm going to assume the presence of this person here is a spoiler for Trails Beyond the Horizon, because I have no idea what that person is doing there, and I didn't think they would be in a position where they would be remotely near the front of this kind of event back in the day in the first place. So that's cool. The CG of Cassius at Lena's bedside after she passed away is also at a different angle and has a lot more detail in it. The crying small Estelle almost completely destroyed me. And then in the background, we can see Mayor Klaus, Mylene, and Father Divine. So, like, there's actual official art of two generic liberal NPC models now, except they're all really sad because it's two specific ones who are friends of Lena Bright. It's not something new to this version, but Joshua being surprised that Cassius knew the queen is kind of interesting to me. Like, that is the one thing about Cassius Bright he didn't already know, either from just paying more attention to his surroundings than Estelle ever did, or subconsciously doing recon on him for 5 years for Ouroboros. He just somehow completely missed the fact that he was close with the queen. Another maid adjacent thing that completely sent me is there's an Estelle expression that was made specifically for her being told about sex by Hilda, and nowhere else in the game. I can't even think of another place in the entire Sky arc where they would use this expression if they didn't already use it for her responding to Olivier's antics. So, like, they really wanted to sell this scene, I guess. Don't really got a lot to say until we get to the Princess Liberation mission. The original game always had dog enemies just kind of running around the middle garden in the central area of the villa. But in this case, there's just 4 of them just kind of kicking around. I went and beat those guys up purely in action combat mode just to restore my character's CP every time I got into a battle after exiting one of the rooms. And you're way more incentivized to go into every room this time, because even the ones that are usually empty sometimes will have one of those green item spots on the ground that's usually a stat booster or something like that. So that's cool. Another really cool thing is Chloe's hairpiece in her princess outfit has a different texture applied to it than her regular natural hair. So, like, you can actually tell which part is the extensions and which part is her regular hair, even if you didn't see her earlier design where she just has her short natural hair. That's a really neat attention to detail. When Olivier and Shara show up to make the save, Olivier says, "Quite a grand entrance for the main character, wouldn't you say?" Which is great because Olivier is the stealth main character of, like, the first 10 games in the series, so I'm glad he's self-aware of it even back in Sky FC. I don't really know how to feel about all of Olivier's joking terms of endearment for people being cat-related in this version of the script. The original definitely mixed things up a whole lot more, but we have everybody being a kitty or a kitten this time. I don't like Discord moderator Olivier, I have to say. The fact that he says, "Farewell, my little kittens, heart," when the party split up would have made me slightly genuinely uncomfortable if it weren't for the fact that the scene earlier on in the chapter where Estelle smacks him with her staff back over the loading zone into the restaurant was kept completely as is in the remake. And yes, there is no punctuation at the end of that sentence in the subtitles. The party split is exactly as it was in the original, so I don't have a lot to say about it. Though if you do go to the map while you are controlling Joshua's party, you'll see that the map icon is actually a Joshua icon. And this is one that is only used during this section of the game because it's Estelle every other moment. I'm guessing this icon will be used in SC as well for the portions where you are playing as Joshua before the two of them reunite, but in this case, it's another really cool case of attention to detail that proves the love Falcom put into this remake. One really lacking quality of life improvement that they should have made in the remake, though, is adding a shop to buy monster ingredients, because, surprise, surprise, you cannot get every single monster ingredient as a drop just from regular enemies in the highways outside of Gransel. Some of them not only are exclusive to the sewers, but are exclusive to the North sewers. So if you haven't already made all of the recipes, plus banked enough ingredients to make the ones you could only get in the final chapter, in Chapter 3, you have to grind up all the ingredients you're going to need outside of Gransel before you go past the point of no return, then grind the rest of them out as Joshua's party in the North Gransel sewers, potentially making Joshua significantly overleveled compared to Estelle. By the way, full recipe book completion is 126 recipes instead of 58 like the original game. And depending on your luck, it might take several tries to get the second of the peculiar or normal version of a dish you're trying to make, so have fun with that. I kinda honestly can say, don't go for the platinum on this game. One of the achievements is to complete every reward objective, and a lot of those are absurdly grindy, and the only reason I was able to complete them all by the end of my New Game Plus playthrough is because I spent a lot of time, even before I hit New Game Plus, trying to grind some of them out. There is absolutely zero need for there to be an achievement locked behind starting 750 battles with an advantage attack. The only way I was able to get that was by actively grinding specifically that for at least an hour and a half, on top of fighting almost every enemy in my original playthrough and starting as many battles with an advantage attack as possible. Also, the only way I was able to get the Earn 1 Million Mira achievement was by selling every single stat booster for my entire playthrough. If I hadn't done that, 100%ing both the normal and New Game Plus playthroughs would have barely gotten me there. As for the actual gameplay of the route split though, pretty good. I do still think it is kind of weird that Estelle's party has several boss fights during that gauntlet, but Joshua's party has only one big actual fight against the intelligence division, but I guess it's supposed to be balanced out by the fact that they have an entire dungeon. The arts Amalthea uses in her fight are, I think, different than the ones she uses in the original game, and she gets at least one craft. But the neat thing is, her craft animations have just as much sauce given to them as animations for characters who are not playable in this game but might be playable in future ones. So, like, are they setting her up to be playable in a later remake? Are we going to actually get to control or have as allies her and Richard during the scene in second chapter where the intelligence division actually helps out against Ouroboros? I couldn't tell you, but I do think it would be cool if they added a few more changes in SC compared to this game. The dog enemies that are called Attack Dobermans in the original localization are called Attack Dovens in this version, which is a legitimate change to be more accurate with the Japanese, and surprisingly is even more consistent with later games in the series because there are a lot of dog enemies that are called Dovens later on. So props to GungHo for this change, especially because it makes the Gundam reference way more obvious in this version. Now, you would think the other dog enemy that shows up in Estelle's sequence, which is called Solid Dozer in the original, was another case of XC just changing a name a little bit to make it sound funnier or a straight up mistranslation, but no, that is accurate to the Japanese and is maintained here as well. I'm absolutely sure everyone is on the edge of their seat to hear my Dunin battle opinions. Well, his craft where he buffs one of his allies only affects one person at a time instead of everyone. That's a big change from the original. Also, the craft he has where he heals himself or the other people, I'm pretty sure is stylized as him actually using Tyrol or whatever kind of bombs on people instead of just being called heal. That is the only major difference. He has 40,000 HP on Nightmare. That is twice as many HP as Reverie Phase 2 had in the original game. That is very cool. And then we arrive at the big Louve battle. And I am so happy to say they completely nailed not only the scene before the fight, but the entire fight itself. Full disclosure, I only took 3 tries to do this in my Nightmare playthrough, but I am 100% certain the only reason I was able to do it that quickly is because I already knew how to beat the fight from the original game. If I was going into this completely blind, I would have absolutely been hard stuck on the fight for at least an hour. All his craft animations are extremely cool. Estelle is your only physical powerhouse character, so you can't just blitz him with S-crafts like you can a lot of other boss fights late in the game. And he even keeps smashing Sword, a craft that he only has during the tournament fight, in this version of the battle, so he has another new move to use at you. I can't recall for sure if he's actually able to clone himself in this fight in the original game, or if that's a thing only reserved for his SC fight, but either way, he pretty much opens up with cloning himself here, and Earthguard EX is an AoE, so it hits both of them. Granted, it is just an HP shield instead of perfect guard for 2 hits like it used to be, but that's still pretty significant. Oh, also the clone can use his S-craft as well. When I first did the fight, I didn't quite realize that nerfing Heaven's Kiss to require 90 CP didn't nerf it out of being completely broken, so I instead used Shara more as a pure caster, and well, Sylphin Wing really helps a lot here, as of course does Earthwall. And I gotta say, the smashing sword animation is great. Like, Zero Storm, that looks pretty much like a one-to-one translation. Demon Flames is embellished because it's his S-Craft, of course it's going to be. Smashing Sword is just a big jump where he scoops you up off the ground with his sword and then dunks you. Now, that's funny enough when it misses, but it's even funnier when it hits you but you have Earthwall on you, because he does actually lift your character in the air and dunk them back down, but instead of being in a hurt animation, they're just standing there in their normal in-combat idle pose, and it looks absolutely hilarious. Realistically, the way you're probably supposed to do this fight is keep feeding Shara CP food so she can spam Heaven's Kiss, and then have one of your other characters clock up EX Shara, because, by the way, that accelerates the character you casted on now, and then keep looping that with Heaven's Kiss just to make sure everyone can just keep going infinitely and lock him out of turns. But at least on New Game and not New Game Plus, even on Nightmare, I was pretty easily able to kill the clone just with collateral and then slowly whittle him down along the way. It really helps that HP heal terms have been drastically nerfed when applied to enemies compared to the original. I did absolutely have to panic button Chloe S-Craft more than a couple times in that fight, but I'm fairly certain I didn't even need to use a Zerum powder or capsule at any point. It was just raw brute forcing it and holding Chloe's crafts back, besides using Vice Aura to give everyone foresight when I wasn't using Sylphin Wing. Vice Aura, Morale, Clock Up, and maybe Saint sometimes are really the only buffs you need to do a pretty good job against him. And while he'll definitely use his S-Craft several times against you, literally just keeping Chloe back so she's out of range and can only barely touch the other two who are closer to melee range with Vice Aura when you need to use it, still works perfectly well. Plus, both Chloe and Estelle have Resurgence as a support ability, which allows them to revive a party member who dies with a small amount of HP and a CP boost, while also not counting as them dying so they maintain any buffs they had, once per battle. Don't quote me on this, I definitely need to run some testing to confirm it, but I think if the character dies and gets revived, the once per battle resets and they can do the res a second time. I might be confusing this with the character barely surviving and then Chloe and Shara's regular heal ally who got attacked thing activating instead, but I seem to remember multiple CP boosts happening and that coming in clutch. Shara's self-buff support ability is also completely absurd. It gives her all stats up and can stack with itself, so if you trigger it before the stat buffs run out, you get not only a duration refresh, but also a second or third tier of the buff, and this stacks with Saint. So if it has one turn left and hasn't been re-upped, you can just use Saint instead to keep the train going. So Shara, pretty good even if you're not spamming Heaven's Kiss. Suffice to say, this fight absolutely lives up to the original and is still one of the coolest things in the Trails series. Then though, we arrive at the final dungeon, and yeah, we're this deep into the video, I don't have too much to say about it that isn't something I've already said about something else in the game. While they keep the god-awful map design of the original dungeon, you do get an in-game map as opposed to just flying blind, so it's not remotely as abysmal an experience as it was in the original, and is more on the side of, this could have been better if they reinvented the dungeon from scratch. Another stupidly grindy reward task you need to do to platinum the game is the one for getting every quartz. Now you might not think that's too bad, but you do need to get the new upgraded level 3 plus versions of every single regular stat boosting quartz. So that's 14, 2 for each element. And the way you upgrade those is by getting 3 of the normal level 3 quartz, and then also 5 U Material Plus, which are an upgraded version of U Materials that drops from quests, chests, and some enemies, or can be traded for 5 regular U Materials. So yes, in order to 100% quartz, you do in fact need 70 U Material Plus, or 350 regular U Materials, not counting the ones you used upgrading all your other gear. I ended my original playthrough with, I think, 2 or 3 level 3 plus quartz, and that was after deliberately not upgrading anyone's final dungeon weapons except for Agate and Tita, who I brought to the final boss fight, as well as only upgrading 1 set each of the gender-locked final dungeon gear. It's kind of rough out there, and it wasn't until I was in the final dungeon on the New Game Plus playthrough where I finally got enough U Materials to get all the quartz. As for the battles themselves, While even on Nightmare, they do kind of fall over compared to the originals, they are still fantastic. Amalthea still isn't super different from her fight in Gransel Castle, besides the fact that her ads are different, but it is still a genuinely good fight that I enjoyed doing. I already mentioned how amazing Richard's craft animations are, but the fight itself is also really, really good. I do love the fact that once you get rid of the ads and get him relatively low, the optimal strategy to deal with him is literally just have one party member on each of the 4 sides of him, and at that point, he won't even move out of your bully circle, and it's very difficult for him to even hit 2 people, because I'm pretty sure the only thing he has that can even do that is Luminous Wheel. Plus, if you have people who have guarding-based support abilities, which Joshua is guaranteed to do, they're not even going to get super hit by that at all. And yeah, get Richard low, let him enrage a couple times, use his S-Craft a couple times, and then just bully circle him until everyone's maxed out on CP, so you have 200 going into the Reverie fight. Genuinely a good strat, and he deserves it. I'm pretty surprised Reverie's design is exactly the same as it was in the original game, because it really does not match any other ancient robot in the series after this point, but it's still a cool design, so I'm not really complaining it's there. The change in visual style, though, allowed for scale to be really impressive. Reverie is gigantic, as are the photon judges that Richard summons in his fight. So that's another really big aura improvement compared to the original. And even phase 1 of the Reverie fight has a cool trippy background. The 2 ads that are called left and right forceps in the original game that eventually become Reverie's arm weapons in the second phase are Bowsorp L and Bowsorp R in this localization. Now, I checked. That is legitimately closer to the Japanese name. I still couldn't tell you what a Bowsorp is. I'm pretty sure the Japanese wasn't going for forcep in the first place, so that's certainly a thing. Bowsorp is definitely my new vocal stim, so thanks for that, video game. My strat for the endgame was fill Joshua and Agate up with evasion, because they both have defend and ally support abilities, and yes, even when they block something, it can still miss. And then just have Tita refill everyone's CP, Estelle use Morale, and just physical S-Craft spam the instant I get a full burst. Well, it turns out that you can in fact beat Reverie Phase 1 without killing both Bowsorps. I immediately smoked the one that's actually vulnerable to physical in my first S-Craft rush, but I barely used offensive arts at all during the entire fight, and was able to completely outpace the healing Bowsorp's ability to heal Reverie itself, even through it enraging and killing several people with its crafts, because it also speeds up when it does that, and I couldn't get an Anticept out in time. Plus, enrage is unblockable, so I had to rely on Joshua and Agate defending and reducing damage there. It doesn't always happen. But yeah, I killed Reverie Phase 1 with the healing Bowsorp still at like 75% HP, and that does immediately trigger Phase 2. You don't need to kill every enemy, so that's really funny. Reverie Phase 2, still just a very faithful adaptation of the original fight, but it looks really, really cool. It is really, really big. Also, it only becomes 1 enemy in this phase, so I really, really outsped it. I was able to get into such an advantageous position against Reverie Phase 1, where I was also able to bully circle refill everyone's CP. So if you couple that with the fact that it does seem like you get a couple free turns at the beginning of Phase 2 in this version, just to kind of allow you to set up or recover EP or CP or what have you before Reverie starts actually attacking you, I was able to get my first round of buffs out and then just kind of stop using arts until I was able to get my first round of S-Craft rush out so quickly that I destroyed the AA Canceller weapon before it had a chance to actually use AA Canceller on me. I'm gonna be real with you, my evasion and speed were so good that even on Nightmare mode, where I was not over-leveled, mind you, I did not get hit by AA Canceller at all during the entire playthrough. Now, I did a New Game Plus a few times, and that was a massive issue, but even Joshua and Agate body blocking still avoided it, which was hilarious. Also, Black Fang hitting everything, Final Break having a much bigger radius compared to the original game. Yeah, I got rid of the drones pretty easily whenever they showed up, and they were so relatively not dangerous, I honestly kind of just let them live sometimes, because I knew as a fact killing Reverie while leaving ads alive immediately advanced the phase this time. Didn't know it for the Bowsorps, knew it for the drones because it worked that way in the original. Richard's fight against Reverie after phase 2 is awesome. They fully mocapped that and had him do some really cool acrobatic things and like standing on its arms, which looked cool with the sprites and looks even cooler with full proportion models. So that's great. Reverie actually completely breaks the blade of his sword. I always assumed that the sword just got knocked out of his hands, especially because Richard's sword specifically, but not Richard himself, shows up in a later game and the sword is completely intact. So I guess he just got a new sword after that in this new continuity. But then, of course, Cassius coming in and making the save is amazing. He pretty much just says, sorry to keep you waiting, shows up, uses a less flashy version of Estelle's hard break animation, and manages to sever Reverie's arm with a blunt weapon in one shot. Then he just completely nonchalantly destroys Richard's worldview, then sits back and is like, all right, you guys got this from now. That one attack, combined with the one attack I used to save Estelle and Luke in the prologue, was my entire actual contribution to the plot, and yet those two staff swings were completely enough. Oh, by the way, Reverie is another Xseed localization change that did manage to survive this version of the script. It is called Traumare in Japanese, which is the German word for dreaming, basically. So Reverie makes sense as a translation of it, but it was a German name, so it didn't really need to be brought into English in this case. Though I'm kind of surprised it was kept that way here. I'm pretty sure Reverie is referred to by name in later games in the series, not necessarily the ones that have the Reverie card or the one that is called Trails into Reverie in English, but it does show up later. So this is good because it doesn't break continuity. It's just one of the few things that I kind of figured GungHo would have veered closer to the Japanese on. Because, you know, they did with the Bosorps and those show up in the same fight. Can you tell I really like the name Bosorp? Reverie Phase 3 is also really neat because they make it a whole lot more cinematic. I did kind of expect that they were going to handle that by it just permanently being stunned for the entire fight, but they do something even cooler. Reverie is clearly very damaged, but it actually starts to self-repair, and instead of doing absolutely nothing on its turns, it does regain a small amount of HP back each time. Also, in the original game, you just completely started that phase with 200 CP on all 4 of your party members. In this one, though, everyone is in the same state they were when they finished phase 2, but after a couple active voice lines of Estelle and Joshua getting determined to finish the fight, then everyone mid-battle regains the CP, which is so much cooler and more cinematic. Honestly, I might even need to go back into that fight and see what happens if you just sit there and don't do any damage to it at all. I kind of doubt they programmed in it completely reconstructing itself and bringing you back to phase 2, but I think it would be cool if they did, and I'm more than willing to sit in front of the fight doing absolutely nothing for 2 hours to try and find out. And yeah, then we got the ending, and I'm also very pleased to report that they completely nailed all of the important scenes there. One thing that I knew as a fact they would not be able to do with the exact same impact it had in the original was the reveal that Alba is secretly evil. And that's because it is just straight up impossible to top the regular affable Professor Alba 3/4 view portrait changing to head-on Weissman portrait. Like, that 45-degree rotation is one of the most menacing things I've ever seen in a video game, and you just can't do that in a 3D game that has cinematic camera angles like this one. So instead, they just played the scene completely different. When Joshua is about to call Alba out as being the real mastermind behind everything, it goes into the fully animated cinematic best lighting version of a cutscene, and they just go completely dramatic instead of having a switch be flipped, which works just as well and is just as impactful, but it was a very smart use of a completely different interpretation of the scene to fit the new medium. This is something I really wish they did for the entire game, especially because it is this amazing here. I'm pretty sure it was just a case of me being hyper aware that he's evil the entire time, but Alba opens his eyes way more often than I thought he did in this remake. I went back and checked every time it happens. He still does so in the original. I just think opening the eyes more completely on the 3D model than a partially opened eyes portrait, where it does still somewhat look like he's using an intrigued expression instead of an I know more than I let on expression, just makes it a little bit more obvious. I think the Weissman reveal is a bit more heavily telegraphed here, but I can't be mad at it at all. The scene with the actual reveal is absolutely amazing here. I assume the Japanese VA did something similar or at least equivalent, but in the dub at least, as soon as the switch between Alba and Weissman is flipped, there's a new grit in his voice, an underlying sense of malice, even when he's saying nice things and not just outright being evil to Joshua, that's really chilling and was not there in the entire game leading up to it, even in the times when he opened his eyes or acted a little bit suspicious. And the coolest thing is, the mask stays off once it comes off. When he talks to Estelle afterwards, you can still hear that malicious undertone, even if the words he's saying are just as honeyed as they always were. Obviously, just reading the script without any voice acting, it still comes off as a whole lot more intimidating and creepy, because you know who he really is now, but it also comes across in the voice acting, and I think that's really, really neat. The main antagonists of this game both have stellar performances in the dub. Absolutely love Richard's performance as well, and I can't wait to see him when he's on his road to redemption in second chapter. The way they show the finger snap, and then Joshua bending over in disbelief as his memories come back, then when he stands up and you can see his face again, the highlights in his eyes are gone. Absolute cinema. A+, no notes the entire way through. The remake version of this sequence might actually be even more tragic than the original, because they really up the comedic factor of Estelle getting flustered right when she leaves to go get the ice cream. Most expressions in the remake don't try to one-to-one replicate equivalent character portraits from the 2D version, instead expressing the same emotion in a unique way using the 3D model, but Estelle's blushing portraits are recreated almost one-to-one, and they're all stellar. The entire part where she gets flustered about love confessions is the blushiest we've seen her in the entire game. And then when she runs off to get the ice cream, they actually play a cartoon quickly running away sound effect and have her sprint away with a dust cloud faster than you can even run in gameplay without turbo mode on. So, absolutely hilarious. And then Weissman shows up, so, gotta love that whiplash. And then there is the ending cutscene and the credits. Well, what is there to say about the ending cutscene of Sky First Chapter that hasn't already been said about the original game? It is a near perfect adaptation of the original cutscene in the 3D art style. And the way they do things, like the embrace, the kiss, Estelle falling over after she gets drugged, it's just perfect. Yes, there are Estelle POV shots with her eyes partially closed and Joshua's voice being muffled while he says some of the most important things. It's made ambiguous in this version if Estelle even heard him say that he always loved her, which adds the tragedy even more. For all the times where I think this remake was too faithful to the original game and tried to one-to-one recreate instead of adapting, they pull out moments like this where they were able to pull off scenes in a way that only this version of the game could, that actually does enhance the experience. Another small detail that's absolutely awesome is the version of Whereabouts of Light that plays during the walk-up to that final scene. In the original game, it always was a much longer loop than any other time you hear Joshua play it on the harmonica, but in this version, they completely added a new section to the song. Now, I'm pretty sure this is just from the vocal version, which is also the ending theme of the game, but they added more to the harmonica version. I'm almost certain it's a longer loop than the one in the original game, and that's really, really cool. Honestly, I'm pretty sure you'd actually have to wait around for it to loop this time, even if you do go to talk to any NPC. The only time you'll hear it loop, the only time you'll even hear the full version, is if you've already played the game, know what's coming, and are dreading seeing it again. That is an incredible touch by a studio that knows this won't just be played by new players, but also fans of the original who want to see how they interpret things in the remake. The credits as well are mostly a one-to-one recreation of the original, with the same framing device of Estelle going back home and looking at a scrapbook that contains photos of her and Joshua growing up together. But like with the Queen Alicia monologue, I think they're improved compared to the original. The first one in the original was just, I think, somehow a screenshot from the opening cutscene of the game that was also a photo, because it's Estelle looking at Joshua injured lying in the bed, but also Cassius is in the background, so who even took that if it's supposed to be a diegetic photo? In the remake, Joshua is sitting up in bed, trying to turn away from Estelle, who is also sitting on the bed, trying to forcefully feed him soup, which definitely tracks for something Cassius would take a picture of. Next is the fishing one, which in the original, it's just Estelle in the foreground and Joshua sitting in the background while she's fishing, and he's just kind of side-eyeing her. In the remake, he's sitting right next to her, and she's putting the fish directly in his face, which is probably the actual reason he's looking away. We go a bit out of order here, because instead of showing Joshua meeting Shara for the first time, we have one of them just eating together. And this is the awesome part. We get brand new outfits for the three Brights in this credit sequence. I've never seen any of them the outfits they're wearing here. Cassius has a sweater, Joshua also has a sweater on over a button-down shirt, and Estelle has a cute pink hoodie. There are several new Joshua and Estelle outfits in here, and I really, really hope we get to see them as costumes later. Meeting Shara is mostly the same, except instead of pushing him at her, Estelle is dragging Joshua by the hand to meet her. This one's kind of a lateral move. Purely in terms of flustered Joshua expression, I think I prefer the original, though. The best part, though, is when we get to ones that include other characters. Next up is the Sunday School one. And in this, we have justification for one of the new side quests all the way back in Chapter 1. Yeah, Estelle and Joshua have new outfits, that's all cool and good. But now we see that, yeah, that's Alyssa and Tio there in Sunday School, sitting in the pew in front of them, teasing Estelle for falling asleep. Now, younger designs for Alyssa and Tio have existed since the original game. The same designed characters appear in the Sunday School CG in the original game, and there are even unused portraits in Trails in the Sky the Third for them, suggesting that there was going to be a flashback including them, but now that we got to see them in 3D, it's really, really obvious that that's who these two girls are, and we even got a side quest building on the friendship between the two Brights and those two girls. So this and the changed CGs makes them feel like so much closer and more real friends. Then it seems like the pictures actually time skip, because the CG of Estelle and Joshua training together, both Estelle and Joshua look noticeably taller, and Estelle is wearing another new outfit that is kinda close to her actual bracer outfit in first chapter. But she's sticking with the red shirt theme instead of going full orange like she later goes with. Next, the CG of Estelle, Joshua, Alyssa, and Tio just kind of shopping together in Roland was replaced with a scene of Alyssa and Tio showing up and bothering Estelle and Joshua while they're working part-time at Elgar Arms and Guards, which is absolutely hilarious. We can add Mr. Elgar to the list of random Trails in the Sky NPCs using generic models who have full 2D art now. And yep, new outfits for both of the Brights again. Then there's yet another time skip. As Estelle and Joshua look older, they're wearing new outfits again, but these ones are really, really close to the outfits they wear during the game itself. And it looks like they're actually doing their junior bracer training because they're in the guild, while Ayn is pointing things on the request board out to them, and you can see Shara and Cassius watching them in the background. I don't know why they did this. Shara is wearing a subtly different outfit that's pretty much just her final outfit but less revealing in this one CG, so that's pretty funny. Like, they didn't need to do this because she's significantly younger here. Other than the outfit, she looks exactly the same as she does in the final game. She just decided to get a boob window after this, I guess. It was also while this CG is on screen that I learned that the English localization was handled by Actil Incorporated, a company that it's very hard to actually find things out about because their website is hilariously out of date, but appears to have been responsible for Atelier series localizations prior to Gus taking the localization job in-house. Now, I haven't heard a lot of bad things about Atelier localizations up until that happened, but as far as I could tell, other than speculating that maybe they were working on this game specifically, no one in the Atelier fandom was able to actually figure out what they were doing since they stopped doing Atelier games, and there were 4 people credited with no specific roles being given to them. For contrast, 19 people from Xseed are credited on the Steam version of the original Trails in the Sky, 9 of whom are specifically credited for doing localization work. In addition to that, additional editing is credited to Side Europe, Localization, with 3 new names there, which means this new English localization was straight up worked on by 2 different companies, one of which has almost zero information on it and might have significantly downsized in recent years, and the other of which is based out of a completely different continent. And while I can't remotely make any accusations about this script, they do heavily advertise that they use AI in their translations on their website. Now, Side is a massive company that has a bunch of different divisions and has worked on a whole bunch of different things. A prominent Japanese to English localization they did for a game releasing this year was Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, which they translated into a whole bunch of different languages on top of just English, as well as handling dub recording. And yes, Side was also responsible for the English dub for this game. Except it was Side US, an LA-based location, that handled the dubbing work. So, primary localization was done by Actil, which is also based out of LA. Then editing was done by Side Europe, and then it was passed back to LA, but still within the Side ecosystem to do the dubbing. So, yeah, it makes sense that this was as messy as it was. I have a lot of criticisms when it comes to NIS America's handling of the Trails series, but it's nice to look at the credits through Trails Through Daybreak, and NISA localization team has over 50 people in it, and those are the only people credited for localization on the entire game. Side Europe is also credited with making the 3 brand new localizations, Spanish, French, and German, and while it's not split between languages, there are 27 people for that, so on average, 9 people handled those languages, as opposed to only 4 people handling English. Side Montreal is credited for the localization QA of the new ones, and there are 25 people credited there. So, on average, 8 1/3 people were on localization QA for each of the new languages. There were 3 for English. Anyway, this CG is brand new to the remake credits, and it and the following 2, which are also brand new, completely replace a CG from the original that is Cassius holding a drink looking at a portrait of his wife, so don't know what to say about that. The next CG is Estelle and Joshua holding bags they were clearly shopping at Renan and are bringing the stuff they got back home. Alyssa is also there, as are Luke, Pat, Klaus, and yep, Renan is also there, so add another one to the list, alongside Luke and Pat, who do also use generic models. I don't know what's going on here. My favorite new CG, though, is the one that comes after that. It's Estelle and Joshua studying late at night. It looks like it's winter because there's hot mugs of either tea or cocoa in front of them, and they're both wearing heavier versions of their original pajamas. Estelle is sleepy. She fell asleep. She's lying on an open book, and Joshua is just looking at her with the most love possible in his eyes. Yes, this does twist the knife of the ending in even further. Yes, I do love it. The last CG converges back with the original. It's Estelle on the balcony listening to Joshua play the harmonica, but once again, they're much older, basically exactly the same as they appear in the final game. Their outfits are shifted again a little bit closer to the ones they actually wear in gameplay, and Estelle now has her green pendant around her neck. I cannot stress this enough. In the original credits, Estelle is wearing the exact same outfit and looks exactly the same as she does in the opening cutscene. Joshua also looks exactly the same, and he's wearing an outfit we later see him wear in flashbacks to the same time period. They also still look like 11-year-olds the entire time. In the remake, they go through like 4 or 5 outfits each, and you can clearly see their progression as they grow up from kids who were shoved together in an awkward situation to the bracers we see them become in the very beginning of the game itself. And I think that's pretty beautiful. The best part is, the end of the credits in the original had Estelle packing up and getting ready to leave. But in the remake, because they have hindsight of how the rest of the Sky arc went, Estelle is wearing her outfit from Second Chapter, and it looks amazing. Speaking of Second Chapter, just like in the original game, there is a teaser for that as a post-credit scene. But again, since the original Second Chapter already exists, they already know what they're gonna do when they remake that, so a lot more is actually shown off. We see Louve at Hamel, Estelle and Annalise sparring at the local training grounds, Ragnard, the towers activating, the Glorious shooting at the Arcee, and then even Luciola and Ren's remake designs. And yep, young Ren looks great. I'm sure she's going to be just as smug as she was in the original game. And yep, Luciola's boobs are way bigger than they were in the original. Yes, she is giving Risha a run for her money. And yes, that's absolutely terrifying. Louve's standard outfit already has a fully done model because we see him from the back during the play, but we get a bunch of close-ups of it and Joshua's new design because there's a bunch of them dueling on the deck of the Glorious, and that is quite glorious as the name would suggest. And we end with a zoom out over a bunch of characters on a grassy knoll somewhere. And there's some interesting choices. It is all the party members from Trails in the Sky second chapter, except Joshua and Josette. Kevin is all the way in the back, so we can't see his face clearly. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just his Horizon model with different shading, and they'll completely remake him for this remake. But then also, Annalise, Kurt, Grant, and Karna are there. Annalise and Kurt, yeah, they're party members in second chapter, but they're not really permanent party members. You can't bring them to the final dungeon. And Grant and Karna are just never playable. So I'm kind of thinking maybe we're actually going to take all of them to the Liber arc. I kind of hope that the Liber arc is going to get a complete revamp and be more like the mega dungeons that are final dungeons of other later Trails games, where you have multiple pathways and you bring multiple parties through there before everyone convenes for the boss rush at the end. If they make all 4 of the other bracers permanently playable and you bring them to the final dungeon, that would be pretty cool, I think. And then also, they could do something I've been mentioning. Later Trails games, namely the Cold Steel and Daybreak games, whose mechanics were used to revamp Trails in the Skies combat for this remake, allow you 8 party members. 4 party members on the field at a time. You can switch out once per turn at will. You can only have more than 4 characters to choose from just during the final Dungeon of Sky first chapter, so I understand why they didn't do that and just made it the same way where you can choose which 2 party members you have and switch them out at the professor. But I'm kind of wondering if as soon as you get the 5th party member in the SC remake, it begins to work like it does in later games, and they just start tagging along with you. This also makes doing active voices a whole lot easier if everyone who's currently joined your party is with you the entire time, and they don't have to record a bunch of different variations for whichever characters you happen to have with you. Then, giving you a bunch more party members, yeah, that sure feels like a modern Trails game. And if they have all the important Liberal bracers go with you to the Liber arc, that brings in the opportunity to have cameos from other bracers from other countries come in to hold down the fort on the grounds in Liberal while the final chapter is happening. Would Cassius call in someone like Arios, Toval? Elaine should be a bracer at this point so we can even see her as a rookie? That would be pretty cool, and I think they should probably do something like that. It is also worth mentioning that if you add Joshua and Josette to the amount of characters seen here, you get 16. That is the amount of playable characters in Trails in the Sky the Third, but it is also exactly enough for 2 8-person parties. So, I don't know. Falcom, I kind of hope you cook with the SC remake. Basically, if they iron out the English localization issues when they remake second chapter, this could be a pretty generational Trails game. And there are already a whole bunch of people hopping on with this remake alone. And like, if SC comes out within 18 months, and you have word of mouth from existing Trails fans, and from new Trails fans who got hit with the cliffhanger, and from the hype of seeing how cool SC is going to look, yeah, Trails is never going to be a big name in the JRPG sphere, but I think its star is really rising here, and that has me extremely excited. So, yeah, you've now watched several hours of me very in-depth reviewing the tiny minutia of Trails in the Sky first chapter, and I'm not quite done because New Game Plus also exists. Like in other Trails games, you can choose which of a few things to carry over into New Game Plus, but the important one is the option to increase enemy levels by 50. The level scaling is a bit different in this remake compared to the original game. You finished that one at or a little bit below level 40, whereas this one is scaled so that Reverie is level 50, and you're going to be just about that level when you get to it. I couldn't tell you for sure what the remake's level cap is, but I'm guessing it is 100 to go along with the fact that Reverie is now 100 in New Game Plus if you add the level increase option. This matters because New Game Plus is absolutely required for an achievement that requires you to defeat Reverie Phase 2 at level 100. And I kept on Nightmare for New Game Plus, and yeah, it was way easier than the main game was, largely because while the stats of early game enemies were massively increased alongside their levels, their movesets are not conducive to me rolling up with my completely outfitted endgame characters. I did die a whole bunch of times, but that was only to fights that already gave me trouble in the first playthrough. The first time I died, period, was against the boss of Chapter 1, and yeah, honestly, I think the Capua family is the hardest fight in the game on Nightmare, because it has just that exact mix between the player not having a whole bunch of options or unique pieces of gear, while the enemies are complex enough to give you a big run for your money. Unfortunately though, in the interest of getting this video and the final review done in a reasonable amount of time, I did not complete the entirety of the New Game Plus achievement on Nightmare. I got really close. I beat Louve, I beat Richard, I beat Reverie Phase 1, but I just could not do Reverie Phase 2 in a reasonable time frame. So I just very quickly backed out to my before Richard save, dropped the difficulty to very easy, steamrolled everything, one-shot Reverie Phase 2, and just was done with it and got the platinum. Once the levels get into the 90s, the amount at which their stats increase goes up kind of exponentially, while the amount of experience you get is weighted extremely, extremely against you. I genuinely think it is impossible to actually grind to level 100 in this game, and level 99 will require you to just keep spamming the final boss fight, then repeating the entire game in New Game Plus Plus over and over again. Only half my party leveled up from beating Richard, and at most everyone gained a third of a level from beating Reverie Phase 1, so I went into Reverie Phase 2 not fully healed. That fight is designed around you leveling up when you beat Phase 1 and being fully healed. Plus, Reverie Phase 1 was harder, so I couldn't make sure everyone was at 200 CP going in. Reverie Phase 2 has almost 1,000,000 HP on Nightmare New Game Plus, and that's not super insurmountable if it wasn't for the fact that it does its Enrage at a much higher HP percentage, and that percentage means a much, much higher amount of HP compared to regular New Game. It enraged for me when it had almost as much HP left as regular Reverie at level 50 had. Also, by the way, Reverie Phase 2's Enrage lasts 99 turns and gives it massive stat increases. Yeah, sure, you can anti-sep the stat increases, but my entire build was built around evasion. You cannot dodge an attack from an enraged enemy. I did not have an enemy to completely retrofit my build, and probably also 100% another New Game Plus run just to get enough resources to fight the thing on equal footing. It just wasn't worth it for me. I had like a dozen Zerum powders and capsules. That wasn't enough to keep me alive. It's okay. I already beat the entire game on Nightmare. I beat Louve on Nightmare New Game Plus. I'm okay with tapping out when the exact final fight of the game happened to be designed around making sure my exact strategy didn't work. Despite that though, I can pretty reasonably recommend New Game Plus to a challenge seeker. Believe it or not, you do actually have the option to do the increased levels but not carry over anything else into New Game Plus, including your character levels. I did try that. I did a New Game Plus Nightmare run where my character started out at level 1. At most, you can do 1 damage to the enemies in the very first tutorial fight of the game. Now, the funny thing about that is an action mode fight. You also can't die, and the enemy can't force you into turn-based mode. It would be theoretically possible to 1 HP at a time, kill all of those enemies, and then level up a whole bunch because they're level 51. I'm not going to do that, but someone should, and I will absolutely watch that video when it gets posted to YouTube. That aside, New Game Plus as a challenge run or a chill run, completely viable, completely reasonable. I could see people who really love this game doing that. Regular challenge runs in a regular new game, I could also completely see people doing that. You get enough options where it is interesting and not boring to restrict which ones you're able to use in this version, which I can't 100% say about the original game. Platinuming it though, do not do this. It is an unnecessary grind, and you're not going to get anything out of it besides maybe bragging rights if you do actually defeat level 100 Reverie on Nightmare, which you can easily do without 100%ing everything else. Is it a good game? Well, yeah, duh. I've been ranting about how much I love it for this long, so play it if you haven't. I don't know why you would if I've spoiled it this much, but maybe you're someone who already played the original and just wants to know what the remake does. Well, now you know, and you know that you should probably play it. I am going to sleep and then start recording the final review. Until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.